We were at Miramar, where Peter Jackson's now got part of, you know, his Weta, etc. And it was, we had like an editing house and a camera house, and the accounts house was wedged in between. But there was a dark room in the camera house as well, and I used to spend a lot of time in there. But it was great. Sam Neill was working there then as a director his acting career was just taking off. And it was a place where you could really experiment, actually. There were great characters and great minds, actually, at the film unit at that period. So it was a kind of great place. It was like, I used to say it was my film school. It was a great place to get started. Every match, there was the French tour of New Zealand, and they were shot in different speeds of slow motion, and we cut it edited to a piece of Tchaikovsky, and they were all shot on 16, and we blew it up to 35. I think it was probably Super 16. We blew it up to 35 mil. But it was it was a really great film to sort of cut my teeth on. It was my first actual editing. I'd just been assisting up to that point. Well, Arthur had chosen the music. I mean, he, as the director, he had the sort of concept very clearly in his head. But there was a lot of footage. I mean, they shot, as you'd imagine. There was a lot of footage for each. So it's trying to find a rhythm and trying to find images that work together. It was a really fun film to cut. I still remember it very vividly. Having been at the film unit, I can't remember how long I was there, maybe 3 years, and then going to television where I had to turn around a program. The rushes would come in on a Monday morning, and then that was the program that was edited on the Sunday. We never had any kind of pressure like that at the film unit. So at first that was quite like intimidating, because you just had to make quick decisions. There was no sort of going back. It was shot on reversal, so there was no negative. So it was hard to sort of, you could keep shortening shots, but to lengthen, you know, you generally see the splice. So for that to go out on air, they didn't really like that. You had to keep the film very pristine, like very clean. So it was it was just a different approach, and you'd have to track that and mix it out and have it all ready to go to air. I think we had to have that ready for the Friday. So, and I think they were half-hour programs, they were. So that was, you know, that was kind of like a big, you know, jolt to have gone from the film unit where we had all the time in the world generally. It was very rare for anything ever to have a deadline or a delivery date, which seems insane now, but it was, so that was good. It was good to go to television and just have a completely different experience, an experience thing of deadlines and ratings and all of that. And so I learned a lot actually from just the more sort of commercial, if you like. You're thrust into a sort of commercial environment. In Raglan by the Sea, I was working with Dave McCartney. He was doing the score on Queen City Rocker, and he was telling me he had this place in Raglan. I was like, why Raglan? He said, well, you should come down. It's a really great community. And so I did. I went down, and I just thought it was amazing that the sort of pub could be the sort of heartbeat of a small town New Zealand. And there was, you know, the whole Maori Land Wars, and Sam Kariopa, who was Eva Rickard's brother, who's such a character, who used to shoot at surfers for cutting across his land. And I just loved it, and I thought, oh God, we should capture these slices of, you know, New Zealand and put them on film, and because it's something to celebrate. And at that point in particular, I don't think New Zealanders were really that into sort of celebrating what was great about the country. Now it's really, I mean, it's totally changed. And it was a bit like cutting those country calendars. I was just like, oh my God, there's just so many great people in New Zealand, so many great characters, so many great stories. There hadn't been a chat show that had worked in New Zealand. It was trying to kind of look at why they hadn't worked. At that time in particular, we didn't really get that many sort of, you know, celebrities or interest, you know, high-profile people that tend to be why people, you know, tune into chat shows because of the guest. So it was about trying to create a format that would work kind of in its own, you know, stand on its own feet regardless of who was on the show in a way. I'd looked at a lot of chat shows from around the world and looked at ones that worked and what was sort of unique to them, and tried to come up with a format that I thought would work for Gary, work for New Zealand, and work for the audience, obviously, most importantly. And I think setting it in its home, coming up with a theme, so that then that gave it a sort of focus to sort of like, that could be the backbone every week. And rather than just saying, oh, what have you been doing? What's your new book? What's your new show for the guests that came on? So he had a theme every week, and so that was what defined it really and made it sort of McCormick Country as opposed to just another chat show. Yeah, and it rated really, really well. We did 2 series and they wanted to do more, but I was going off to the UK then and they weren't keen to do it without me, which was a shame because it would have been great for it to have kept on going. Some directors have a very clear sense of what they want the soundscape to be, and something like Quiet Earth, obviously the sound was incredibly important because it all had to be post-sunk, so everything was redubbed basically. And Bruno Lawrence wasn't the best at doing, so he had to redo all his dialogue. And he found it really hard because it has to lip sync and match, and you do it in the studio. And then we didn't really have the sophisticated studio way of doing that now. And also electronically now you can just make it fit so much better. We had to do it painstakingly, taking out a frame, half a frame. So it was a kind of completely different setup. It was so labour intensive. It's kind of crazy to think of it now. But your Quiet Earth was very, very specific, and Jeff, as you can imagine, had really kind of clear ideas of how he wanted it to be. But it's great fun, and it's very creative sound, because even the atmospheres from what sort of bird tracks you're going to use, if any, in that case, or the wind, or it's a very kind of just creative and fun way to spend your time being a sound editor. Well, that's the one that I felt wasn't something I wanted to edit, to do as an editor. I'd just finished a long haul in the editing room, and that's when I was at the sort of crossroads and thinking, I want to, go into a different direction, and wasn't quite sure what that was going to be. So that was when Larry said, would I work on Queen City Rocker with him? And it was difficult. I think from memory it was like 6 weeks of night shoots with, cast for the most part hadn't acted before. And they often had to be sort of, kept awake with lots of coffee for various reasons. So it was pretty challenging. And I remember one night the crew didn't want to kind of do an extra hour's overtime. And of course in the editing room, you just, as any editor or sound editor will tell you, you just work the hours you have to work, the days you have to, we didn't. So that sort of approach really, I hadn't kind of come across it before. It just wasn't our sort of ethos in the editing room. So. But I thought, that's fair enough, they don't want to carry on working. So I rang the producer to ask for his advice, because I thought, well, I'm not really entirely sure what to do. And he was, I clearly woke him up, and he just hung up on me. So I was like, oh, okay then, all right, what will I do? So anyway, I thought, well, we should just wrap and come back the next day. It's not going to be the end of the world. But it was a sort of baptism by fire, really, because I learnt a lot, because there was, I had come from the editing room, there was a lot of stuff I had no idea about. Stephen Woolley said to me, who's Neil Jordan's, producer, did The Crying Game and Interview with the Vampire, and he's made a lot of amazing films. He said, look, we do have this script that needs a lot of work, and it's a first-time director, and it's his idea. Have a read of it and see what you think. And it needed, a new writer to come on to it. And I thought, God, to tell that story of the Beatles, of the fifth Beatle, to even take on, pulling the Beatles off credibly on screen, that's all very challenging and very risky. But I thought it was a great story, number one, which is always the most important thing. And I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? It can be a disaster, and I can always go back to New Zealand. So it was kind of exciting, and I just thought, don't be daunted by it. Just kind of, which is always what I do. I just try and keep, very focused and try not to be overwhelmed by what it is I'm taking on. I was the exec producer on it, so it was a project that Matthew Metcalf, who's a New Zealand producer, had, got going, and he had got Toa involved. And I think because it was shooting in the UK and going to be co-production, I think Matt and the Film Commission just thought it would be great to have, some more experience on it, I think, and just, so David Parfitt and I, because I was due to do another film, and so I said to David, look, why don't we, come on and exec it together. And then one of us will always be sort of around. But I was a big fan of Toa's, and still am. I think he's great. I've known Sam for a long time. And I thought it was just a really, really delightful story. Just so sort of quirky and gorgeous, really. And I still do. I love that film. It's got a very, I've got a real soft spot for it. And so to exec something, again, it can take on, different forms. But I'd go to set just once a week and chat to Toa during the week sometimes, but I was very drawn by the material and by the cast that they had assembled, and working with Toa. Amanda Posey, who's my main producing partner, Amanda and I have been talking about the kind of material we should be looking for, and I said to her when we read this, and we both immediately started talking about our experiences with guys when we were teenagers, as you do. So And that was when, all through the casting process, every girl, actually, and every boy too, would talk about their teenage experiences. But we thought an education had the potential to be, you know, very universal. And yeah, we just thought, I said to Amanda, it goes against everything we've been talking about. It's not genre, it's not high concept, it's near period. There's not roles that are, you know, hugely castable. It's going to have to be an unknown. It's not like we're going to attract an A-list actor to that role, so that's going to make the finance come together. So there was kind of everything about it. We knew it was going to be a challenge. Some people found it controversial when we were trying to raise the money, because they saw her, you know, they'd say he's a paedophile, and he's not a paedophile. We're like, she's of age. So there's, we got that actually when we were doing, before it came out and we were doing press, we got that a bit in America actually. Which was interesting. And you'd sit there and go, but she's of legal age, so, you know.
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But it is, you know, it's sort of on the edge, but that's what, you know, that's what's interesting about it as well. I mean, and interesting for us, when we met Lynn Barber, whose story it is, she said it made her never trust, you know, anyone again. Having been so, you know, convincingly conned, as it were, and she was conned, her parents were conned. But people are conned every day, and it's a very, again, it's a very universal occurrence. Sometimes I think, you know, making films is independent films. It's tough, you know, it's tough, and every time it's, you know, it's tough. But I do love it. I wouldn't do it otherwise. And I feel fortunate to, you know, be doing it. Sometimes I think, oh my God, I'm just like, you know, the sort of, sometimes I feel I'm really just at the beginning of my career and could go, you know, for another sort of 30 years, because there's so much to learn in every film, every group of people you work with. You just, you know, there's so much to kind of learn and gain, so it's an ever-changing, you know, experience.